Starting recording. So I guess we just wanted to kind of give a rundown on what Suricata actually does and looks like. So you can, like, if you're working on something like Firefox, obviously it's right in front and center of you, right? So you can see it. Suricata a little less so. What I did was I created an Ubuntu 2204 virtual machine, which is what you see here. It's a pretty basic install. I believe I went, as we recommend. Oh, we got someone. Okay, I started by going to our. I installed the virtual machine. I'm using Virt Manager because I'm running Linux, but this should be completely applicable to VMware or VirtualBox if you're on Mac or Windows. So I went to our installation instructions from source. You're going to be a developer. Don't want to use a package. And then I scroll down to the Ubuntu Debian. And I pretty much just copy and pasted all these lines in just to make sure they would work. And they did. I didn't get any errors, and I was able to build Suricata afterwards. And that's the point that the virtual machine is at right now. Kind of fresh install, the dependencies installed, and that's about it. Just see when I'm recording here. So we'll get started with the actual build process. I gotta keep in mind, I've been doing this roughly every day for like the past 10 years, so I kind of sometimes might gloss over something, so interrupt me if there's any questions. For this virtual machine, not that it matters too much, but the username I chose was Suricata, and the password was Suricata as well. I'm just going to start from scratch. Even though I test built and everything, I'll pretend I didn't. So I'm just creating an Outreachy directory to be my work project directory. Normally, so I'm expecting that you would have already forked the project to your own GitHub repo and authenticated to GitHub, which is something I didn't do. So I'm going to use the HTTPS URL. I just realized I didn't actually authenticate here, so that's going to fail. But normally you would clone, Git, whatever, something like that. Because I know that's going to fail for me. I'm just going to use the publicly accessible stuff. There. Should be pretty fast. I don't know how fast the build will be. So that's the only part where your line might differ. You're probably going to use your own GitHub forked URL. And then I think all of our documentation uses this bundle script now. Juliana, can you confirm? I think we...
I'll check it, but we have been trying to
that. This has only been in our documentation for maybe a year or so, so there might be documentation that doesn't have it. This is because Suricata, as checked out, isn't completely buildable without some extra stuff that's in 2 other repos, so we try to just make it easy to get them, so I'll just run that. You can see it's checking out lib.htp. We'll recall it bundling. And then Suricata update. And these just end up in directories here, lib.htp and Suricata update. And then I should keep the Firefox window open here for the install docs. I want to go as close to as what we document as possible instead of using any of my habits. Yeah, so scripts bundle sh autogen. So the next step is the autogen. It takes a moment. this is kind of an after checkout thing, or if you kind of clean up your directory a lot, you'll need to do that. The next step is we just document, we use configure with no arguments. So we'll use configure with no arguments. This can take a moment. If this step fails, it usually means that there's a missing dependency, which would mean going back to these commands here. The recommended ones are the best. I did not show the installation of cbindgen or Rust, but I did install Rust with Rust up, which I actually don't see documented here.
I think.
So, go ahead.
I think somewhere I saw somewhere else differently. Maybe we have to update our documentation with that.
This documentation is kind of targeted at end users who want to install from source. When you're a developer, we do recommend using Rust up. There are extra Rust tools you might want to install that are just simpler with Rust up, which is what I did. And Rust up is pretty trivial, easy to install. Nope, that's not it. You just Google for Rust up, and you essentially just run this in your terminal, and you'll get Rust. Anyways, with configure done, you can do your make. I'm going to do a make mine as J4. I think I only have 4 CPUs here. And yeah, I'm running in a VM with not the fastest machine. So this will take a moment as well, if anyone has any questions or anything. First build is always the longest. If you just change a file, if you just change a couple of files, things go pretty fast.
We do have to update our installation from Git instructions for developers in our Suricata developer guide. Just noticed. There's always something else to be done.
Yeah.
See, folks, it's not just you that have to go back to stuff. We do that all the time.
We're thinking of a separate little guide outside the documentation that's getting started developing Suricata quickly or something. %99% of people who read it and install it are end users, not developers. So that's why that documentation is guided that way.
Yeah. But that's something that comes from having newcomers, and Outreachy is great for that. So we thank you guys for pointing out where things could be improved, because that's how things get more accessible for everyone who wants to come and contribute to Suricata.
Push that built pretty quick. So now we have Suricata built. What's the next step in the installation instructions? I lost the... make install. Oh, and there's a ticket being worked on for this, right? Because make install actually isn't enough to get... Oops. Make install is going to try to install to user local, which requires root access. So we'll just do a sudo make install password. Now I think one of the Outreachy tickets is finish off this documentation, right, with make install full. So you actually get this little warning here. Run make install comp if you want to install initial configuration, or make install full to install configuration rules. I can't remember the last time I ran make install conf. I'm always make install full. And you need to be right to those directories. Basically what it did was it installed Suricata, all its extra files, and then went out and downloaded a rule set, a free and open rule set that everyone can access without registering or paying. So you get some rules to actually generate some alerts. And then we're going to run this command exactly as is. You can now start Suricata by running as root, something like this. Well, have to be root. I don't have that interface. The install script isn't aware of what interfaces you have on your computer, so you'll have to figure that one out for yourself. IP space A will get you a list. LO is almost never what you want. That's a loopback interface. In a VM, you're probably just going to get one interface. On other machines, you might get like the Ethernet, the wireless, depending what you get. So you'll want the one usually with your IP address in it. So in this case, it's EMP1S0. So I'm going to take that previous command, replace E0 with EMP1S0. -I is just short for like the interface name you're going to be listening on. There. Takes a moment, but that was pretty quick. And Suricata is running, listening on EMP1S0. Not a whole lot of information was printed. If you did want to see more information, you can just tack on some -Vs. One is one extra level of verbosity, and then 2 and 3. We'll go 3. And you kind of get a bunch of information about what it's doing on startup. And then there's some websites out there for testing this stuff. One, testmyids.com doesn't work, so we have testmyids.org. And there's nothing exciting here. It just returns this string, but it is something that there's a rule on that matches on that. So I'm just open another terminal here. We're going to go over to the log directory. Log Suricata. And this is kind of the meat of what Suricata is about, is getting these logs out. The fast log is kind of a very just text log that's very human readable, of alerts only. So we're going to look at fast.log, and here we got a timestamp. This is the ID of the signature. Every rule we match on has a unique ID, so you can look for it in your database or search for it online, find out more information about it. Description, GPL attack response ID check, return root. If you look in the browser here, this is something that Linux will actually output if you ask Linux who you are. If I type ID, it's going to tell me who I am. UID, my user ID is 1000 with username Suricata, GID 1000. So that's kind of what this is looking for. I think you don't see it commonly these days, but it's the sign of an old attack over unencrypted protocols like Telnet. Or not a sign of attack, a sign that someone got elevated privileges over an unencrypted channel. So that's kind of what Suricata is about, is looking at this network traffic and printing out these logs. For more detail, we can look at the EVE.JSON, which is the structured logging file. So a way to run less with color, but I can't remember what it was. Let's go to get to something. Stats records in here. Let's get past the stats records. There's some stuff. Well, here's some interesting other things you can find out. I didn't do anything for this to happen, but the Ubuntu system I installed went and reached out to private.canadianshield.sierra.ca. That probably has something to do with my location being in Canada. And then Firefox went and did some phoning home with telemetry, which I didn't ask it to do, but I also didn't ask it not to. Download some images from Mozilla. Yeah. Something that Suricata can be used for is finding out what's going on your network, what your computer's doing that you don't know. So let's try to get to something. I don't recall going to Google either, but Firefox did. Here we finally get to the thing that I actually did. Suricata is logging this HTTP request to testmyids.org. Knows my user agent was Firefox and some details of the HTTP request. Then a stats log got in there. Stats records are just logged every 60 seconds or 6 seconds. That can just happen whenever. And then we get the JSON version of the alert. Source IP. Source IP here is actually the IP address of the server because this content actually came from the server to my machine. And my machine IP address is this 192 address. In the alert, you get some extra details like the HTTP stuff we saw already logged. You might not think of this as downloading a file, but pretty much everything over HTTP is downloading file. So we did record it. It didn't have a file name. It was just / because it was testmyids.org. There was no file name. And then flow information is, I'm just going to skip over file info, get to the flow. Flow information is just records of communication from one machine to another. So in this flow record, we see there is a connection from this 192.168.124.206, which is my virtual machine, to some machine on the internet with 34.120. It was on port 443. It was TCP. There was 11 packets to the server, 7 packets returned, the number of bytes to the server, number of bytes returned, when the conversation started, when the conversation ended, how long it lasted. In this case, it was probably under a second, which is why we have 0. I don't think we have sub-second resolution there. Anyway, that's all that's kind of it. That's all the information. It's a lot of detail. It's a bit raw to look at it that way too. I'm going to go to my personal sort of visualization of this on my home network, so I hope there's nothing too personal showing up in there. So you can use it to visual, like you can load it into graphs. This is a tool that I write that anyone can get that loads up those log files and kind of presents them like this. So this is that GPL attack response, the one that we did inside the VM, kind of represented in HTML with all the details. This is kind of more, tries to be a little bit of showcase of what Suricata logs. So it kind of shows you everything. Other tools might kind of curate what they show you and show you less. I guess the flow ID, every conversation has an ID, and it can be useful to find out what happened. We know this attack signature went between 2 machines, but what else happened in that connection? And then we click on the flow ID, and then we do see what I showed you in that log. We have that HTTP event, we have that alert, we have the record of that flow, and some file, like the file representation of that data. So that's just kind of a representation of the raw log data. That's kind of it. That's Suricata in a nutshell, I guess. That's the end user part. I pretty much have a developer set up as well here. Should I run Suricata-Verify, like, just so we can see it?
Um, if you have time for it, I think that's good. I personally like Suricata-Verify a lot because it has several small examples of Suricata usage. It has PCAPs, it has roles and keyword usages. So I like checking stuff on Suricata-Verify sometimes when I have to develop something. I usually go there and see if there's something connected to the test that I have to write or that could be there. So I think it's useful.
Yeah, okay. So Suricata-Verify is kind of part of our development process. You make a change to Suricata, Suricata has unit tests, but then it also has these extra verification tests which run Suricata on PCAP files, which is kind of a simulation of network traffic or a recording of network traffic to make sure it does what we expect it to and we don't break it. But it's in its own repo. Suricata-Verify. That's quite a few tests, so the test directory is full of tests, so it's quite a big directory. There's pages and pages of tests in it. But run.py is the script to run all these tests. But the trick is you have to be in a Suricata build directory, or a Suricata source directory. So I'm back in my Suricata source directory where we did the make and build. And then I'd run Suricata-Verify by providing the full path to that run script. So it was in, just use the tilde from my home directory, run.py. That's it. That's all you need. Oh, it's got to go build one of its tools. We have tools also to make sure that the JSON is formatted correctly and matches the schema that we have defined. People build a lot of tools around that output, and if we accidentally change something, it could break other people's tools, which is embarrassing if it was unintended. Has happened. All right, now it's running tests. We're going to pick one and break it. What's a good test to break? You can limit which tests you run by .prefix. By providing just a substring. So if I do a .prefix, it's only going to run the .prefix. If I do TLS, it's only going to run tests that match TLS in their name. But let's break a test. I'm going to find one that does .prefix. So oftentimes our files are broken into modules that have something to do with their name. So detect transform .prefix is where I can break the .prefix test. Oh, the default Ubuntu VM does not have Vim in it. I added that. It's not in our instructions. You don't have to use it. Let's see. This should break something. I'm just going to comment out a line that looks important. And then make. In that case, the make was pretty fast. It just had to rebuild the file that we modified. Now I'm going to rerun. Yeah, and I broke it. So .prefix all these test fails. It gives you some detail about how they fail, which will line up with the stuff that's in the Suricata-Verify test. So I could go over to Suricata-Verify tests. These names line up with the directory names. So there's my test, and I'm going pretty fast, but just kind of an idea so you know where stuff is. And this is what a test specification looks like. So each test runs Suricata, and then it's going to look for, in the log file, it's going to look for an alert with a signature ID of 1, and it's going to look for just one of them. If there's 0 or more than 1, the test fails. Likewise for signature ID 2. What did the error tell us? Expected to find 1, but it got 0, so the test failed. Anyways, that kind of explains, that's usually the development process is like edit a file, there's one other test I should show while I'm here. -u is unit tests, which is the internal test that I read in the code. Oh, I didn't build it.
But we have to configure it.
Okay, so our documentation on docs.suricata.io is more geared towards end users, as mentioned. So as a developer, you probably would want to do something like enable. This makes me want to get started on that developer quick start guide. This is going to enable the code for unit tests, which is disabled by default. Because as an end user deploying Suricata into production, you don't need the tests. Hopefully the build is quick. Nope, it's going to rebuild everything.
So we've got a question about if what you are showing means that if whenever someone submits a pull request for Suricata with a new feature, there should be a corresponding Suricata-Verify pull request. And the answer is this depends. If your pull request changes any output, we usually will ask for a Suricata-Verify pull request to come along. If you add new output, then we will also ask for a Suricata-Verify pull request. If there's a bug and we want to first verify that bug, we will first create the Suricata-Verify test and submit a pull request for that. That pull request should fail because there's a bug, right? And then we will proceed to add the bug fix to Suricata, and then the Suricata-Verify test should pass, and that's how we know that things are working. So in many cases, yes, we will ask for a Suricata-Verify pull request when there's a new Suricata feature.
That's a thumbs up. So my Suricata rebuilt, so I'll just run it with the unit test this time. I believe this is actually going to fail. I failed 3. This should probably be something we fix. The unit tests are trying to write to some directory that I don't have access to, that my user in the VM doesn't have access to. So I almost always run unit tests, like -u to run unit tests, -l to set the log directory, and then dot just to log into my working directory here. And now all the tests should pass.
And we have the change that you made to
Yes.
dot prefix, right? We actually had a question a few days ago precisely about that test that fails because of the log directory. So it's good that we have this documented now.
Yeah, might actually just make a pull request that fixes that for good. So that finally worked. So we have over almost 3,000 unit tests, and none of them failed. I actually have, so this, I don't know what you call it, tribal knowledge or cultage knowledge or whatever, that stuff that doesn't get documented very well. I have a script that essentially does, I call it QA.sh, and it, it kind of looks like and then I think that's all it is.
That's great. I feel dumb for not thinking about that.
And then I'd have it outside my source tree somewhere so I don't accidentally delete it. And then so I always kind of do a make and/and dot slash slash. This and will just do these two commands back to back, assuming they both success. Assuming it exits successfully, it'll run the next command after the ampersands. And so that essentially looks like my development process. Often I'll leave off the Suricata-Verify if I'm just in the early stages of compiling. Sometimes you got to compile lots before you actually get a successful compile. There's no point running Suricata-Verify until you do have a successful compile. But that's kind of my development process. I'll have an Emacs over in another window and that over in another terminal and just go back and forth.
Oh, that was cool.
I think that's about it. I don't really have anything else to add to that. This might be sometimes going back and forth to the browser if you want to test. Like that test my IDS stuff is going back and forth to the browser can be a pain. So you can go to, choose curl. There. Just a shorthand to doing it on the command line.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for showing us that. As usual, I have learned new stuff as well. People, do you have any questions, anything to share?
Should we perhaps show the build info thingy because people seem confused which things were, like which files, which directory are stuck in?
Show what? Sorry, the build info?
Yes.
Okay. Just prefix that with this /configure command. If you type it with help, you get a ton of arguments here which can change how Suricata is built, where it's installed. As a developer, we probably all have a few that we set ourselves that we don't talk about or document very much. But when you're curious how a Suricata was built, Suricata build info will kind of give you this information. Get the version at the top. I don't want to go through everything in here, but some of these are going to depend on what operating system you're on too. AF packet's kind of a Linux only thing. IPFW you're never going to see support for on Linux because it's for a different operating system. It's like WinDivert. You'll only ever see enabled on Windows. Excuse me. And a bunch of these will depend on what packages you have installed. Like our basic install docs for Ubuntu do not install the Lua libraries. So when I build it here, I'm not going to get the Lua support. But if I did go install the Lua libraries, I could tell Suricata to build with Lua support. It's probably not going to be something you have to worry about. Unless you're specifically working on Lua stuff, which I don't think any of the Outreachy tasks are. Rust support, this is kind of an odd one to have it anymore. We don't build without Rust, so we can probably get rid of some of that. But it is useful to know which version of Cargo and Rust were used to build Suricata. And then right at the bottom here, we get where Suricata was installed. These are the defaults. Lots of people don't actually use the defaults, but I want to just stick to the defaults for matching up with the documentation. I think that's about it there. I did run this from the source directory, but as we did install to user local, the same information is available there. When we have people submit bug reports and other things along those lines, we usually want some information from build info. That's it for that one.
One quick thing that is useful probably as well is the clang script. Many times when you work with the code, there may be formatting changes that have to be done, and our CI will fail that. So running the clang scripts is a way to prevent that failure.
I didn't actually try that here.
Okay, we need the clang. Okay.
Does this gonna work? I don't actually use Ubuntu on a regular basis, so I don't know what the package names are. There we
It's a
go.
bit annoying. We will finish this clang thing, and then we will answer Comfort's question. But yeah, Jason, do you want to go over what you just did?
All right, actually, if you are working on C, this is an important bit that I don't think we have well documented because it will fail CI. I did install the clang-format script, which would go into our developer quick start guide, but not necessarily the end user build guide. Thing I didn't show is that when you're doing your work, always use a branch. We like to version them. Now I'm going to edit that .prefix file again. That's a little easy. So detect .prefix. Can't even find it anymore. Okay, detect transform .prefix. Stupid bell. I'm just going to change the formatting. Let's see. Well, that's it. I'm going to add an else statement, else, and then that's just a log line. All right, there's nothing wrong with this. As far as the compiler is concerned, it should build. There's our diff, like the code we added, so I'm going to make a commit. It didn't like that.
Yeah, that part will be complicated because
I have to set this up. Okay, it's forcing it to. All right, now my commit went. Now, if I went and pushed this up into, made a pull request out of this, the CI is going to fail. I don't actually know how to show that here. Can I do a check? Some things.
check branch, I think.
Check branch, yeah, there we go. This is pretty much what the CI is going to fail on. It's error branch requires reformatting. I don't usually run this locally. I edit my C files and then I do scripts with clang-format branch. And it edited it for me. It automatically edited it for me. I can see the change that I made. and it just indented it correctly. That was it. Sometimes the changes are bigger. It'll break a real long line into multiple lines to fit within a character limit, but that was the simple one. And then we get into the fix-up commits. So I fixed it up. Now, if I push this back up, you're going to get a review warning that says something like squash your fix-up commits or fix them up so you don't have commits fixing up new work. You want to have just one commit with the proper work in it. I think there's probably a million ways to do this. I always do an interactive rebase. 9's my number, unless I need to go back further. And then what I have here is, the last 9 commits. There's the commit with the work that I want to commit, but there's my fix up. And then if you see down here, fix up. You can change the pick into other things. So I will change that to fix up. Actually, just F works, so you can do fix up. Save. That second commit is gone. It was integrated into my first commit. And then git grep, right?
Yeah, it was. So how does one find and understand the specific part of the code related to the bug that they are working on or the feature they want to implement? That is a very complex question.
Well, I will. So say someone reported a bug in dot prefix. Let's go. Someone said dot prefix was broken. Well, I don't know what dot prefix is, so I'll go to the code and type in dot prefix, or to go to the documentation. Oh, it's a transformation. I don't know. I read through this and I see, dot prefix, here it is. Oh, it's part of the rule language. Well, now I want to find it in the code, so I'll go git grep dot prefix. And there's all the mentions of dot prefix in the source code. Actually, not very many of them. So that helps you narrow down to which files are involved with something. Base 64 decoding is something we do, or we want to know everything that uses base 64. We get a much bigger list here. You might want to limit it just to the source directory. So we're going git grep our pattern we're looking for, and then the directory we're looking for it in. So this is only going to show me files that are in the source directory. So that's the source directory is C files. Rest code is actually in the rest directory. You can get fancy with regular expressions, right? So actually, I don't do regular expressions well with the grep command. I rarely need to do it. But usually that's as far as I usually go with git grep. Sometimes the information on the screen is just too much to go through, so you can do something like git grep. You just want to list the files that have that pattern in it. So that can be useful too. Base 64 is quite a few files. Dot prefix should bring up a lot less. Yeah. And then you kind of know which files to focus in on while you're debugging an issue. I do this process all the time.
One thing that I do, for instance, not for finding where to change stuff, but say I'm working with a file I've never worked before or something new, and I don't know how to format my commit message. I will go with git log and see how things were done in the past for that file or that module, and that helps me. So git log breadth is useful, for instance.
Load up the dot prefix one again. So I might compare it. This prefix is unique source. It kind of just means a general sort of chore or cleanup or something like that. But dot prefix is actually lives kind of in the detection layer. This is all stuff that kind of takes being around the project a while to know. So we'll fill you in on that on pull requests and whatnot.
And there's, sorry.
I was just going to say this. I sometimes prefer.
I love Tick.
Which is going to give you much the same information, but in a, you can now scroll up and down, get the commit message. I don't know, it's just a different UI to the git log. A little more user friendly, even the power users use it too.
Yeah, and then from Tick you can squash commits, you can edit message. Yeah. There are a few additions that you do to the configuration, wherever, and then it's quite interesting. I do basically all my Git process from Tick, and you have to add a few lines, but you can, if you do Control R on whatever commit you want from there on, then you will have the list of commands, like a interactive, what was it, rebase, and then you would be able to do things. But I don't know, I think you have to add something new. Yeah, you have to add stuff. But it becomes quite useful and powerful. But even without that, you can stage files, you can edit changes per line when you are in the staging page or screen. So if you have to fix specific things, it's quite useful.
All right, I have to explore Tick more. I don't actually use it to make changes. I just use it as a viewer myself.
And Gray is sharing something that we usually will do ourselves, which is go to previous commits and check. Sometimes there are explanations that are useful. Sometimes people worked on a different file, but with a similar issue. So you learn a lot from that too. There are actually a few Outreachy tasks related to adding more keyword details, for instance. That we already have a few commits related to that. So if you pick a different keyword and you don't know how to proceed with that, if you go back to our commits or even the pull requests, you would find a lot of useful information doing that. I do that a lot. As I've been an Outreachy intern myself, and one thing that I find is a strength of working with a project like Suricata is that because we have a node project with a very big source base, this means there's a lot to learn from. So if I have to do something, someone did something similar at some point in the past, so I can learn from what was done, so I can build up from there to do my own contributions. Make my own contributions.
All right, any more questions?
All right, I think we are good to go. This is a wrap. I really liked this. Folks from Outreachy, I hope you enjoyed it as well and you could find useful information.
I'm typing something. Hey everyone.
Oh, okay. We'll wait then.
Yes, it was very helpful. Thank you. Thank you for everyone. I'm glad.
Great. I hope the recording worked.
Me too. If not, we'll have to do this again. So, while you were following the previous commits to the community's repository, you saw that most commits were tagged documentation. I think that truly depends on what you are working on. If you open take, for instance, or if you do git log with just one line, you will have. It depends on what we are focusing on or how much works whoever is working on documentation got done at once, I guess.
I'm sorry, I was typing a lot fast, so I didn't like get a lot of time to think about what I was typing. So what I was saying is like tests that are tagged outreachy, most of them are tagged docs. So is it like a requirement that each and every outreachy intern has to do a docs related issue? Because I was looking of ways of how I can get started, and I saw that many of my fellow interns were like had some dogs related issues. So I was wondering whether it is a requirement or yeah.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. So, no, it's not a requirement. What happens is that sometimes documentation issues are easier to get started with new projects. So we label some documentation issues as good first issues because then you can learn from our contribution process without having to spend a lot of time trying to understand the code. But in the end, some documentation tasks end up not being as easy as expected in the beginning. It depends really on what's the task and how you approach it. Sometimes documentation tasks can be frustrating, if I'm to be honest. I think some may have experienced that because with documentation, it's not binary, right? So you may read one thing at one point and say, okay, this looks good, and then you check again and it doesn't sound so well anymore, or worse, we cannot test documentation for many things. So it's easier to introduce regression. So you may have a PR approved, and then we double check, and there's an issue that we had not seen before, and we have to go back. So it's not a requirement. Sometimes it's easier to get started with documentation. Sometimes it's a rabbit hole. So you have to find out what works best for you. But one thing is for sure, it is a requirement to have a code-related contribution because both our projects, and usually whatever project we have for Outreachy, are code-related. So we do really want to see your coding skills and how you navigate code, even if it's code that you are not familiar with. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, pretty sure. Thank you for that.
And I hope I did not disencourage anyone. So
I
while I
think
was, sorry, go.
I'm sorry, I had to unmute again. One other question I wanted to ask, and I know that I'm asking this maybe a little bit too early, but since you're here, I kindly request you to take like maybe 30 seconds to kind of little bit elaborate about the candidate that you could go with in any of the projects that you're having. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I don't think that's something that sort of makes sense to share. Maybe Jason or Shivani would have a different understanding on this, but I don't feel comfortable doing that. What I can say is that in general, most communities will look for candidates that help each other, who welcome feedback, who are good with communicating their questions, who can understand instructions, who show they are proactive, but I cannot, I can only share this more generic stuff. I wouldn't feel comfortable because, yeah, especially because it's also, we are
Yeah,
still
sure,
in the
sure.
middle of the contribution phase.
Yeah, sure. So what I meant was the characteristics and your ideas about the characteristics of the person that you would be going with, and that is well answered. Thank you so much. And sorry to violate principles. Over to you.
So I was just going to say that while I was talking about the tasks, Jason was searching for Outreachy-related tasks, and that's what we are seeing here. I don't know if you want to say something about it, Jason.
I was just seeing how many were documentation. But I think a lot of them are tasks that are documentation but not labeled, right? Like add more details for the ICMPI type keyword.
That's not documentation.
Okay.
Documentation. It's coding related.
All right.
It's for the. We have a feature for role writers that will analyze the roles that we have. It's not just for writers, also, I guess, for whoever is managing roles, I guess. And we are trying to add more details about the role keywords there. And those tasks that Jason was mentioning are about that. The detect analyzer works.
And you also have a demo PR for these for especially for the applicants, right? So
Yes, I
Juliana has
do.
that PR which has everything right, which was merged, so you can take a inspiration from what it should look like. I think it's there on the parent ticket of these.
Yes, it is. Thanks for adding that, Shivani.
All right. So I missed that, but I missed that it wasn't documentation. So I clicked on, if you want to get to the parent ticket, I guess there's just this link up here, right? And then you get a much more description. If the ticket doesn't look complete, look for a parent ticket because it might have a lot more information in it.
And if there isn't, do ask on the ticket. Tell us, hey, I've reached this point, I'm missing the next step, this is where I'm stuck. It's very important when asking questions to try to be objective.
Sometimes we'll add a ticket with just one line and not much information just because we don't want it to get lost, but we realize that it might not make sense to anybody else. And ask because hopefully it still makes sense to the person who created it.
Okay, this was longer than expected, but I think we covered a lot of good subjects. Folks, thanks a lot for being here. Thanks a lot for your questions. Jason and Shivani, thanks for your time. And yeah, that's it. Have a great evening, afternoon, end of morning.
Here all. Yeah.
End of morning for me. All right. Great.
Yeah. Bye,
Thanks a
folks.
lot, Jason. This was very helpful, I'm sure, for everyone.
You're welcome.
Oh, why is my
Echo. All right.
okay? Yeah.
Bye, everyone. Stop the recording.
Okay, good night. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.